Welcome to another amazing episode of Raising Private Money. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, also your host on the show here. And this is the show where we talk about raising private money without ever having to even ask for money. This is also the podcast where I have amazing guests come on here and talk about their story, their journey as to how they've gone about raising lots and lots of private money for their real estate deals. Well, my guest today, he's grown over 70 companies, for goodness sakes, from the ground up, from $0 to $100 million throughout a, quite frankly, remarkable over 25-year journey so far. In addition to that, well, he's got 12 books already published that he's written, so he's a prolific author. And he's got a lot of experience in building multiple companies all the way from the ground up. Many of these companies have actually reached 7, 8, and even 9-figure valuations. Well, not everything has been roses and smelling the roses throughout his journey. If you've been an entrepreneur for any length of time, you know we always have setbacks, and that is the resilience and the determination that keeps us moving forward. Well, my guest today has got a very, very big story about even when he was around 30 years old, he lost a $20 million portfolio. And we're going to hear his story. You're going to be fascinated as to how he went through that, how he overcame being homeless and went on to rebuild his wealth beyond 9 figures. Well, he has today revolutionized the retirement industry with what he calls the groundbreaking retirement plan system. And he's also changed the whole landscape as to how the home and apartment construction industry through his company and his pioneering work that he calls FrameTech. So we're going to hear all about that. So in just a moment, you're going to meet my amazing guest, Mr. Damion Lupo, right after this.
If you're a real estate investor and are wondering how to raise and leverage private money to make more profit on every deal, then you're in the right place. On Raising Private Money, we'll speak with new and seasoned investors to dissect their deals and extract the best tips and strategies to help you get the money, because the money comes first. Now here's your host, Jay Conner.
Well, hello, Damion, and welcome to the show.
Jay, it's good to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. My lands, you've raised personally over $200 million in private money. Can't wait to hear the story on that. The audience is already sitting on the edge of their seat, even while they're driving their cars and tuning in and listening in. So we definitely want to hear the story, your backstory that led up to when you were around 30 years old. You had built a portfolio of $20 million. You saw that go away, and then continue the story as to how in the world did you persevere through that and then build it all back even bigger than it was before.
It's funny that it was not a continuous process. That's one of the things about losing your butt. $20 million going, I was -5. So it was a $25 million turn from 20 million to -5 in 12 months back in 2008. And it wasn't a overnight, I'm back and I'm doing something. It was about a 5-year timeout box. And that's one of the hard parts, because when you get beat up that bad and life kicks you in the teeth, there's a process of being afraid of your shadow. And that was the hardest thing. And I think one of the reasons it took 5 years and not 5 months or a year, or a lot quicker than it could have, was because I was isolated. And anybody that has ever gone through something, you're going to go through it a lot faster if you've got people around you. And unfortunately, my ego thought that I was all by myself and that it was just me. Nobody else had gone through it. I wrote a book about it in 2012. And after the book was published, it was called Reinvented Life. People said, you know what? I went through that same thing. And I thought, man, I wish I'd have known you, 4 or 5 years ago. We could have commiserated and moved through this. So but I needed it. I can tell you that the guy that I was 20 years ago was a guy that I wouldn't want to meet today, and you wouldn't have liked. And so I'm really glad that I went through it. When you lose everything, you end up homeless. It shifts the focus on what matters. You tend to be more external on other people after you have gone through a process of being hedonistic and really focused on the money. So I'm really grateful for the process. I don't want to do it again, but I'm grateful that I went through it.
So, what real estate asset class or classes were you in when, of course, we had the global financial crisis, 2007, 8, and 9? I had my wake up call in January of 2009. So, you and I have got a lot in common as far as 2009 goes. But what was the asset class?
So, here's one of the great mistakes that people make. My answer was and is back then all. Like I was doing everything. I had no focus. I had hundreds of houses. I was remodeling apartments. I was building condo towers. I was flipping $4 or $5 million houses on the coast, East Coast, West Coast. So I was all over the place, scattered, fractured, not focused. That was one of the biggest problems. I had no idea what was going on. I was just chasing everything, thinking, man, I can do this. Donald Trump did it. I can do it.
There's a writer downer right there. I've never heard the phrase fractured and not focused. Did I hear you say that right?
Sure did.
Yes. So what are some of the big lessons or takeaways from that experience, losing a $20 million portfolio? And another way of asking the same question is, if you knew then what you know now, what would you have done differently?
Well, the first thing is whether somebody's listening or watching and you're thinking, man, 20 million, I only got 20 or I lost 50, or it doesn't matter when it's all you got, it's all you got. I have friends that are going through bankruptcy right now. They were syndicating apartments. They were going through a process, building wealth, and now they're going through the chapter 7. And when it's all you got, it's all you got. So first off, if it's all you got, there's a psychological process. The thing that I look back and I wish I would have known was you got to have people around you that are 10, 20 years down the road that are bald or grayer than you, because you don't know what you don't know. And the moment that my ego and pride took over and I said, oh, I know everything. I'm the smartest man on the planet, 10 feet tall and bulletproof and all that nonsense. That's when I got in trouble. I had those people around me for the first 5, 6 years. And then I shifted into a place where I was paying for people to be my friend, whether it was a mentor or other people telling me what I wanted to hear. And that's like the kiss of death. You got to have people around you. Their one job, this is what therapists do. It's the right coaches, the right mentors. When those people are around you and you pay them to tell you the truth, and they'll tell you the thing that hurts, the medicine that you need to take. That's what I stopped doing. And I've seen that a million times with people and their ego and their pride. That's probably the number one thing. Make sure you see the truth and you're not swallowing and smoking your own exhaust. That's what people do because they think they're so smart. And the reality is, as you know, been out there for a long time, we don't know everything. And the older you get, the more you realize you don't know. And that's the big wise moment. Oh, wow. And you thought you knew everything at 20 or 30. But the reality is you need to always remember there's way more that you don't know. And having people that'll point out your blind spots is key.
So would you say you have more of a humble outlook as the way you look at life and the filter that you have as you see things?
There's a thing that I did when back in the day, and I say the day, I'm talking early 2000s. This was the beginning of the 25 years. I was Mr. Optimistic, man, rose-colored glasses on everything. And if you said it can't be done, I said, I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. I told you, I would tell you I could build the Great Wall of China in a week. No problem. I'm going to figure it out. And it was always about how can I do this versus should I do this? And there's a humility in realizing that there's actually some different type of thinking. There's realistic thinking, pragmatic thinking, pessimistic thinking. All those things are important. There's actually a great book called Thinking for a Change that everybody should read. And I don't say that lightly, but it's key. You have to understand how to have the different thinkings when it's appropriate. And sometimes you need to be able to carry the same thought from different sides of your brain that are thinking about it in different ways. And then that's also when other people around you, you ask them, what's the worst case, the best case, the most likely case? And you start thinking through these things from an appropriate brain versus whatever delusional emotional state you are in as an animal, basically which is what happens. We get excited or scared or greedy or whatever. And that was the big shift. It was now I can look at things, I look at life, and I'm not just Mr. Optimistic. Things cycle. Things go up, they go down, they go left, they go right. You have good times with people, and you have times where people are trying to kill you, hurt you, steal from you. So you have to be realistic about a lot of those things. That's a big shift, and that's a part of wisdom, going through it and knowing that at your core, so that you're not looking at things as Pollyanna or some other delusional state because it's always the same way, which is what a lot of people think, I think.
I really like the question that you asked yourself that you shared a minute ago. And you said the question to ask yourself, it's much better to ask the question, should I do this versus how can I do this? So when you have an opportunity come along your way, and we all do, I mean, for goodness sakes, all of us entrepreneurs fight shiny object syndrome. I mean, we are cursed. We are cursed with shiny object syndrome. And so when you have these opportunities come along, and I'm sure they do all the time, what's the criteria that you use to decide whether you should or should not?
This is the question about people that focus on passion and they say, well, I have to find my passion. And my answer is wrong. Don't find your passion. Make sure you're on purpose first. Make sure you have a purpose, a North Star. Passion is cool. And I think it's great to have passion and purpose. But when you have a purpose and you have a North Star, it's really easy to say no to most things. My North Star is 1 million people that have their financial shackles broken, that are not living under modern day slavery, which I believe money is. And so when I look at opportunities, my question is this going to help the mission? Is this going to help my big why? And if it is it going to support what I'm already doing, or is it going to distract me? Almost everything is going to distract me and it's going to derail me, and I have no skills or talent around it. So when you have something that's very clear and clean, this is everything that I've bolted on over the last decade. That's, started off with one thing and other things got added, and to the point where we're at with FrameTech, everything has to do with freeing people from those financial shackles. And if once you find that purpose, you can start figuring out what your passions are that will help that. But the problem is that if you just have passion, when it gets hard, you look for the new shiny object. You're like, oh, well, I want to go find something else I'm passionate about because this stuff sucks. And there's a big shift. When it's purposeful, you'll grind and you'll do the hard things and you'll wake up early and you'll jump in the cold plunge of life. You'll do those things no matter what, because the North Star is pulling you.
That is fantastic advice. So let's dive into, no, let's don't dive into it yet. I was going to say, let's dive into really the details of your purpose and how it is that you're serving other people. But let's don't do that quite yet. So you said it was a 5-year sort of turnaround from the time you lost everything until you really started having things built back. When someone is going through a financial crisis, perhaps not to the degree that you did, or quite frankly, it could not be maybe it's not a financial crisis. Maybe it's just a life crisis, that you just, you feel like the rug has been totally pulled out from underneath you. You've lost your confidence. You're scared of your own shadow, as you said. What advice can you give someone that perhaps is experiencing that right now? How do they get back on their feet?
I'll tell you the story about a conversation I had with a mentor back when this was going down, when everything was falling apart. I was running out of credit lines. I had $1 million charged on my credit cards. And then I was being told no, my American Express was being turned off, like things were happening. And I remember going to him and saying, hey, here's my biggest problem. I got a partner that has effectively stolen $5 million from me, and I want to hurt him. I hate him. This guy, I trusted him. He was like a brother. And this can happen in a lot of different ways for people. He said, it won't matter. And I said, how in the hell what do you mean it won't matter? It's $5 million. I need the 5 million. He said, it won't matter. In a matter, there will be a point. And he didn't say it was going to be 5 minutes or 5 months. It ultimately ended up being a decade, and probably a little bit more than that. But that 5 million didn't matter. I had to get past that, because what happens, I've seen this where people will spend a decade just mulling and being irritated, being pissed and saying, that's no good, scumbag bastard. And they get stuck and they never progress. It took me a number of years to get to that point where I started progressing again. But it was a shift into trusting that my purpose and the reason I'm here and my opportunities were going to lead to something that was beyond that. And ultimately 5 million, while it's something, it's not nothing. I've gone so far past that because I let it go. And that's where people have to let go of the stuff. You don't forget it. What you do is you forgive it and you learn from it. And there's a big difference. And if you don't remember it, you're going to do it again in probably a more painful way, because the universe tends to give us lessons over and over again, but they make them harder, more painful if you're not paying attention. So that was the process of saying, okay, I'm gonna forgive and move on. And then I'm going to lever from that, and I'm going to go and I'm going to focus on a mission. Before, it was about Damion's money. How much money can Damion get? After that, it was how much value can I create for other people and help them be financially free, which was what Zig Ziglar taught me 20 years ago. And when I did that, then 5 million literally, and not just, this isn't pie in the sky. That 5 million became almost a rounding error from the businesses that I've created and helped run and build and my net worth and everything else. But it took that shift, and it took my willingness to let go of that stuff and not be a victim for the rest of my life.
Victor, not victim mentality. You just said someone's name that was one of my big heroes and still is one of my big heroes, Zig Ziglar. I got to meet Zig twice. I was so blessed. Did you ever get to meet him?
I didn't. He and Jim Rohn were two foundational people in my life. And I did meet Jim, and I spent some time with him. And I mean, he was those two guys are like the OGs, man. Tony Robbins and everybody else learned from those guys. It was literally those two guys that are kind of, it's like the core source material. It's those two dudes.
Yes, I love it. So let's come back around to where I was going a minute ago. So let's really dive into your purpose that you're, just laser focused on, and tell us some details about that.
Well, this started about 10 years ago. I got a call on Thanksgiving in 2013, and it was my dad, and it was actually a voicemail I got on Thanksgiving weekend. And he said, "Hey, just wanted to say hi. I got some tests back, some results back, and I'm stage 4. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I love you." And I went, "Oh man, that's not good." And I went back, I flew up to Alaska a couple of days later and had the last real conversation with my dad. And in this conversation, we were sitting there at this coffee shop, and he said, "There were so many things that I wanted to do." And then we just both cried. And it was me realizing he was feeling the pain of regret, and it was being seared onto my soul, my heart. And I realized the money stuff that he never figured out kept him afraid and trapped. And that's where most people are. So I started unpacking this and really understanding that the biggest lever and the biggest impact I could have on people is to take money out of the equation, but not giving them money, not just saying, here's the path, but helping them with the path of building confidence. Because once you have confidence around money and investing and finance, nobody can take that away. You can go bankrupt, but if you have confidence, you'll whip right back. And so it was from that trauma and the pain of watching my dad retire with a small amount, and then just being afraid he'd lose it, and then dying, basically not having lived out the things he wanted to do. It was really that as a leverage point for me to go out there and say, I'm going to help as many people as I can. And that's going to be the seminal work of my life.
So how are you helping people achieve that?
So it started off with giving people some clarity that there's more to it than just whatever Wall Street or whatever the school has told them, in terms of you can invest in all sorts of things and money. If you don't understand it, you'll be his bitch. Like, you literally are going to be stuck and trapped by it. So what I did is I said, okay, here's some other things. I started selling some gold and silver, educating, wrote a book on gold and silver. That led into starting a company where I was teaching people how to use their retirement accounts to invest in things outside of mutual funds, taking IRAs and 401ks, investing in real estate, and nowadays Bitcoin and private lending and all sorts of cool stuff. And what was happening was people were becoming empowered. And so, like I said, with the mission, everything was centered on that mission, giving people confidence, power. And so it was a lot of education. It was a lot of one-on-one, and then that scaled, building a community. So then people were teaching each other. And then ultimately that led to sharing ideas around investments, where people could start investing in things using their money, and then getting them actively involved. So they were learning while they were investing. It wasn't just, I'm handing my money to an advisor, I hope it works out, but literally having hundreds of people come out to Arizona and being at a manufacturing plant that we built with their money this last year. It's getting people to the place where they feel like they're in control of their life, that they have a life by design. It's not some default system that they hope they won't run out of money before they run out of years. And that's what it looks like now. Thousands of people that feel like they actually can choose their life, and the future is theirs. It's not somebody else's telling them what it's going to be.
Well, I tell you, Damion, you and I have got a lot in common, because my wake-up call in January 2009 is when I was cut off from the banks with no notice. And there's no fault of my own, but I mean, we know what was going on. And that's when I learned about private money. I'd never heard of private money, and I'm not talking about hard money, but I'm talking about private money. And so I did the same thing that you just shared. You know what I did? I put on my teacher hat.
Yep.
And I started teaching people Exactly what you just said. I just started teaching how they can use retirement funds to invest and get either tax deferred or tax free income, depending on the type of retirement account they got. And I went about it that way because I knew instinctively that if I was out there trying to pitch deals before people even understood what private money was and how they could get high rates of return safely and securely, I knew I was going to be making a big mistake because, as I say all the time, desperation's got a smell to it. And the worst time in my experience to be raising private money is when you actually need it for a deal that you're trying to close next week. That's terrible. And so I went about, and so I just first started out in my own network teaching people what private money is, how they can get involved, teaching them the program. And what you just said reminds me of the handwritten notes and the hugs from so many of our investors, our private lenders, saying how we actually, I say we, my wife Carol Joy and I have, we've changed their retirement years, and they've been able to do things that ordinarily they would not have been able to do without getting involved with us. So that's very interesting, Damion. I've taken the same approach. You've taken the same approach as me of leading with a servant's heart and knowing that you're going to make a big impact in these people's lives. People sometimes they'll say, Jay, I'm fear of rejection. And you know what I say to them, Damion? I say, how can you be rejected if you're not asking anybody for anything and you're simply putting on your teacher hat and offering a way to make an impact? I'm so glad you shared that part of your philosophy because it takes all the pressure off. There's no pressure going on here.
No, you're 100% right. When people ask all the time, because I mean it's a significant number, a couple $100 million. People say, I have a deal. I'm trying to raise 5 million or 10 million or 1 million, and they're stuck. And I go, the reason you're stuck is because you don't have a big enough list of people that trust you. When people trust you, when you've built a network, it takes time and it takes effort. You don't just get that because you put an ad on Google. It's not something that happens overnight. And so you're absolutely right. You don't go raise money when you need it. What you go is you build relationships. But the problem is people have read Tim Ferriss and they go 4-hour work week. How do I raise money in 4 hours? And I love Tim's book. I love actually all his books. They're great. But people are applying it to the wrong thing. When you're talking about doing investments, you're talking about raising money, you really have to go to you go to people. People invest in two ways. They invest in things where they trust somebody and they go, I'm investing in you, or they invest based on their greed glands. Like those glands get all swollen when they're like, oh, I'm going to make 20 or 50 or 100%. Guess what? Most of the time they lose their money. But the trust is where like you can go pitch something and say, I'm going to give you a guaranteed 25%. And you're going to have a whole bunch of people that are going to give you their money. And you're probably going to blow up your deal because it's not real. But the other part that's sustainable is when you build a community, when you build a network. And that's when what you just said, you lead with a servant's heart. You don't go out there with slick marketing and just trying to get people on a list and then telling them what they want to hear. Like you literally are there figuring out how to make their life better in your way of doing that, giving yourself completely. And that's what people generally don't want to do. And the people that are making it happen, most likely that's what they've been doing probably for longer than a month or two. It's probably been years. And then all of a sudden it looks real easy. It's like, how did we raised 14 million on one deal in 4 hours. Why? Because people trusted us and we had a solid deal that we were putting a lot of our own money into. That made it easy. And that's how things get done really efficiently. My buddy, Kenny McElroy, he'll throw a deal out there and I mean, tens of millions of dollars in minutes or hours because he built a reputation and he's got people that say, whatever you're doing, I want in. That's how you raise money. It's based on relationships and those take time.
At my live events, which is called the Private Money Conference, at my live events, we'll spend a whole 2 hours of 3 days just talking about building networks. How do you build your network? So we don't have an hour and a half or 2 hours, but I want us to at least take 2 or 3 or 4 minutes and dive in on that topic because I get that question all the time. And that's true. I mean, all of us are going to run out of our own network, either quickly or eventually. We're going to run out. So, in your experience, Damion, what are some of the your favorite ways to grow your network and to keep your network connected with you?
Well, one of the things is you got to be authentically real about what you're bringing to the table. If you go in and you're like, man, I've known you for 20 years, I'm doing this thing, I don't know what I'm doing, then wrong approach. Like you got to go out there and build some scar tissue around something. Then when you show up to build your network, You're talking about your experiences. That's very different than reading a book and saying, I got a great idea. Like, go out there and do something. And then when you're building your network with that stuff that you've actually done, and it could be minor, you could literally apprentice with somebody for a month or 6 months, just doing something. But the thing that you got to do is, I don't know if Zig said it or Jim said it, but one of these guys said it, like, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's
and
right.
You mentioned those handwritten cards and things. One of the things I did for years, every person, every prospect that came in, and I wrote a book about what I knew, what I'd been through, and I gave those books away, thousands, tens of thousands of those books. Everybody that ordered a book for free on me, didn't charge shipping, I sent the book out and I wrote them a card. And it wasn't, hey, thanks for the order. It was like, man, it was like something that was personal. What happens, people realize, wow, you're actually taking time. You can't get that back. There is no leveraging your time. There's no scaling one-on-one. And that builds a tremendous amount of trust. If you have a phone call with somebody and you're like, hey man, just like, I want to know what's going on with you, and how just maybe I can figure out how to solve something for you or help you work through something. It's those type of conversations where people go, wow, you're not just trying to grab the cash out of my pocket. And to your point, when you're serving, if you focus on serving people with an open heart and not just how am I going to get, like, I've learned a lot from Grant Cardone, but when I hear him say, I want to figure out who's got the cash in the wallet that's going to be in my wallet, like, he has that approach, and I think people can smell it. And you've got it. There's a big difference when you're building long-term relationships where people are going to say, yeah, I like you, and you got a deal you just told me about. Here's $500,000. That happens because you've set the stage where people know that you are going to be a good steward and you're going to protect their capital, and you've got a relationship. They're not disposable to you. You got to think differently, and it takes time. Again, we're back to that. But that's the magic when you actually focus on somebody else's success. The side effect wealth that has been created in my world has been because so many other people have benefited from the work that I've done for them, and it's a natural side effect, and it made me really rich.
I love your share that you gave away your book, don't even charge shipping, etc. And I've got quite a few members in my community that have written their own book on private money, and it's just nice books. It's a great business card for them to share with people. But logistically, how did thousands of people hear about your book or books that you could give away?
So there's a couple of main things. One, so it's funny because you and I are doing this, and the podcasting world just continues to grow. I started doing that 9 years ago, and I said I want to be on every show, and I was out there and I was on tons and tons of shows. Sharing yourself, people start to get to know you. It's like Joe Rogan long form. You and I are not. This is not ABC News where we get to talk for 2 minutes and it's a soundbite. There's good sound bites, but there's really stories and depth here. So find ways to do that. Podcasts, great. Live streaming where you're really sharing yourself, and it's not just a choreographed bunch of nonsense. And then there was a period of several years where if there was a real estate conference, I was on stage, I was speaking, I was sharing, I was giving value. And sometimes I was paying to do that. It was like everything I can do. It was because there was a long game. And that's one of the things. The question is, what's the vision? If your focus is, I'm going to figure out how to make $100,000 or $1 million, it's hard to really show up with a big mission that people can go, man, I want you to be a part of my world, part of my conference, it's a different energy when you've got a big mission and you've got something tactically that's useful. And when I was giving people tools for their members to be able to go out and invest in real estate using their retirement accounts. So it was really valuable for everybody involved, whether it was the people promoting their events or it was the investors, the audience members. Everybody got value from what I was showing up with. It wasn't just pie in the sky. It was actual tactical resources that could be deployed so people could start breaking those financial shackles.
Damion, have you by chance connected with David Meltzer?
I have. I was actually on his show about 2 weeks ago.
Well, I was on his show about a month ago, and he was on my show about a month ago. Anyway, I thought of David. He's got a phenomenal story if you haven't read his book. But he's done the same thing. I mean, he has given away, doesn't charge shipping or anything, thousands and thousands of his book, Connecting Goodness or Connecting with Goodness. So you were sharing your story, and I said, man, Damion and David have got something in common. So in the time that we got remaining, I want you to share what it is that your purpose now. You've got FrameTech. There's three things I want you to dive into in our time remaining. You got FrameTech. What in the world is that? You got the 10-year millionaire action plan that you've trademarked, and you've got turnkey retirement. So, what in the world are those three things, and how do they serve other people?
So they all come back to the mission, and the mission is, how do I help more people break those shackles? So we'll start with the end. It's like starting with the end in mind, very Stephen Covey-ish of me at the moment. But
Sure.
there's a plan. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a vision, there's a proverb that people will perish. And so helping people create a plan, the Millionaire Action Plan that I've been doing with people for many, many years, and ultimately turnkeyretirement.com, where people can go and they download this playbook, which is the 10 steps to 10 million. I think that if you're not focusing on 10 million, you're going to come up short and you're always going to be scared. And so I built this thing. There's a playbook that how I did this. How did I go to 10 million? How do I go to 100 million? Let's start with 10, because it's something within reach for really anybody within 10 years. So it's the 10 steps. It's something that anybody can go do. And it takes you out of that place where you're chasing money, where you can start saying, all right, money is no longer part of the equation. So you got to think bigger. Part of the reason it's 10 million and not a million, it forces you to figure out how to serve more people. So when I had a friend about 3 years ago reach out and say, I've got this opportunity. It wasn't named FrameTech. It was this opportunity to solve the housing crisis. I said, all right, I mean, shit, send me the deal. And he said, no, I got to fly to Dallas and hand it to you. And I was like, how old are you? 150? What are you, Noah? Like, just email it to me. No, he flew out. So he hands me this thing and I look at it and I go, something's wrong with this deal. This is BS. This is fake news. And so I said, but I'm curious. So I flew out to Arizona and met these guys. And what they said was, we have a vision. We've been doing this. We've been building trusses and the bones for houses and apartments for 50 years. And we have a different way of doing it that'll help solve the housing crisis. And we can create a lot of value here for a lot of people. And I said, you know what? I really like this deal, but I love you guys and I can feel you. And over a post-lunch meeting, literally a 2-hour sit down, we said, my partner and I said, we're in. We will get you the $40 million. And they said, thank you. They walked away. And I'm pretty sure they mumbled under their breath, these guys are full of crap. There's no way they're handing us $40 million. We, in fact, did do that over the next year. And we went to our community and said, we love this thing. We want to help solve the housing crisis. We believe FrameTech, this deal where we're using a new idea for building components, all the walls, the floors, the trusses, all the bones for housing. This is the bottleneck for building. And we've got millions of missing houses and apartment units in America, and we're just not building enough. So we said, we've got a vision to do this. We've got a new way of doing it that's 10 times better quality, 4 times faster, and literally, Jay, 99% less waste because of the automation, the robots. So they said, great. People said, we trust you. Here's $40 million. I mean, no joke. And then today we have a plant that is online producing, and it is the model for what housing is going to look like in terms of being built in America going forward. We're building a second one and we have a plan to roll these out. And what this does is it creates a win-win-win-win-win for everybody. The only loser here is the legacy thinking. It's the old way of doing it that hasn't served or kept up. So the communities win, they have new jobs, they have more housing, and more housing is really cool because people say, what about affordability? Well, when you have more supply, guess what happens to prices? It drops. So it helps the affordability. It doesn't destroy the planet. 30% less waste. Like, waste for a house is normally measured in dumpsters. We're measuring it in sawdust because of our technology. And it's just a really cool thing for the people to invest in, because they come to the plant and they go, I'm part of the solution for a big problem in society, and I'm going to make 4, 5, 6x my money. So everybody is winning here. And that's what lights me up. It's why the purpose is more important than the passion, because it's hard work. Everybody is grinding. And we know why, because it's going to help society and it's going to solve a giant problem serving people all over the place.
So give out the website for FrameTech.
Yeah, FrameTech, TEC.com. And you'll know you're at the right place because there's going to be videos there. And there's actually a company with a TECH, and they're in a similar space with metal studs, I think. But FrameTech, TEC.com, you're going to see all about what we're doing. And what's funny, Jay, is that people will reach out and they'll say, when are you coming to Montana? And we're like, well, hey, you know, this is we're rolling these things out, but it costs $60-70 million to build a plant. So it's complex. It's really intense. And they're going to be, this is the future of building. It's not having somebody go build a house on site with a bunch of guys with hammers. It's going to be the way that we're building it. And we can build houses, apartments. And we do, like I said, this thing is exponentially different. We're not, when I talk about changing your vision and you're talking about 10 million, most people are trying to become a millionaire and they go, yeah, but 10 million is 10x. Yeah, you got to think 10x bigger. So we're thinking, how do we make houses 10x better? How do we do things with 99% less waste? These are big ideas, and it forces you to stretch. And when you stretch that much, you create incredible amounts of wealth and impact in a positive way for society, which is really, really cool.
So the houses are actually built in under a roof in a manufacturing facility, correct?
That's right. It's a 120,000 square foot facility under roof. We build the floors, the walls, everything, the bones, if you will, if it's like a body. We build the bones, and then our people, our trucks, our drivers take all these pieces out, and then our team puts the walls up. So a developer or builder comes to us and says, here's the plans. 2 weeks later, they have a house that's framed, and all their subs, the electricians, the plumbers go right in, and they have the best quality product. There is no better quality product in the world than what we're building for framing. It's that tight. It looks like furniture. It's the quality that you would hope for but never get. And if you ever tear apart a house, people are like, man, it's a mess because it's sloppy. And our stuff is literally the best quality, and it's the fastest. And right now the pricing is the exact same as what you do conventionally. So there's no chance somebody says we want anything other than FrameTech. The whole industry is paying attention, and quite frankly, they're going, oh crap, we got to start doing some improvements, which is cool because now they're starting to figure out and think about ways to innovate, which is what we needed everybody to do in the first place.
So, so the materials, all the bones, are delivered on site. I suppose there's still a general contractor, local general contractor, because they got to finish it, right? But your team puts it together. So is the cost of building that single family house, for example, is the cost? It's definitely much more efficient. It's much more quicker. Is the cost less to the general contractor?
Yeah, ultimately and the reason it's going to cost less is because everything is predictable and the time is compressed. So framing that might take 2 months is going to take 2 weeks for the whole process. That 6 weeks per house saves a fortune in carrying costs, and the liability from things that are not quite built right virtually goes away because of the quality control. So ultimately, this is going to cost a lot less for the developer, and then they can pass that along. So ultimately we do better for less, and that's why everybody wins here.
I got you. So how many single family houses can you produce now in whatever length of time?
So each plant, so these plants are basically a franchise model, meaning we, like our second location, we're going to have 2 of the same plants, which makes it very efficient to go build. You're not trying to reimagine something that's 1 million square feet. You just say, okay, we're going to do 8 plants next to each other. So each plant can produce 12 houses a day. So you're talking about 3,000 houses a year. And that's, that's not running 24 hours a day. That's running 2 shifts and 5 to 6 days a week. So and it's very scalable, like, because it's so predictable. And this is for houses, apartments, hotels, anything that's wood structured. And so you really see this as a solution that's scalable. We've lost a lot of the framers. Nobody wants to go out in the sun and the rain and the heat and the freezing and do these type of things anymore. So what we're doing is we're taking automation. Like, our whole plant is built around robots and AI. And so people get to be doing higher level things and not getting smashed and losing fingers and saws. It's highly automated. It's patented. Like, what we're doing is the future of framing, and everybody's starting to see that. And so we get to create better quality of lives. I mean, we're doing some stuff that would blow your mind for our people. Like, we didn't even talk about the people in the plant. We're building not only a cafeteria to feed them, but childcare. So people, blue collar workers, have the ability to have their kids next door taking care of them. We're putting a wellness center in. So we have doctors taking care of these families. I mean, we're doing stuff that nobody's doing unless maybe it's a Google campus, but we're doing this in the blue collar space, looking at our people as part of our family, not as a bunch of cogs in a machine. This is the face of what American business is going to look like. So we're leading the way with a vision that's sustainable and works for everybody.
You know what's funny, Damion, as you tell that story, my father, Wallace Connor, who just turned 91 years old, he was the largest retailer of manufactured homes in the nation at one time. And his factories were 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, with 3 different shifts, just like Henry Ford and the cars. I got to have you back on my show to just talk about FrameTech, because I got about 25 other questions on that. And then so for those of you that are tuning in and listening, that's www.frametech, FrameTech.com. And then, Damion, wrap us up with Turnkey retirement.
So the way over the last decades, watching the whole space of money, people trying to figure out how to get more money. It's kind of like the question people say, how much Bitcoin you have? Everybody says not enough. And so you'll get that if you're in the Bitcoin space. It's the same thing with money. People don't really understand money. Turnkey retirement is about getting to the place where money is no longer part of the equation, meaning it's handled, it's done. You don't have to worry about it. You still think about it because look, it's like a spouse. If you stop paying attention to your spouse is going to go away. Same thing with your money. If you stop paying attention to it, it's going to go away. What I did is I took my experience. This is not fluff. It's not a weekend seminar I went to and I wrote a book or something. I literally said, here are the 10 steps. It'll take you 10 minutes to read this thing. The 10 steps that I did for going from literally negative hundreds of thousands in debt to over 10 million in less than 10 years. And it's that process. It's not overly complex. It's going to require work, but it is a playbook. So Turnkey Retirement was about getting to the place where you're not just sitting on a beach. You're literally doing whatever you want to do without going, how am I going to make my bills this month? That's the goal for everybody. Take money out of the equation.
So if you are listening to this show, go to www.turnkeyretirement.com and take the 10-minute, the 15-minute assessment, and you'll be on your pathway to following the vision of Damion Lupo. Damion, you are truly a visionary. Thank you so much for joining me on Raising Private Money.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate the time. Appreciate everybody being here.
Absolutely. God bless you. There you have it. Another amazing episode, as I promised you, here on Raising Private Money. And in order to make sure we have more and continuous amazing guests like you experienced today with Damion Lupo, be sure to rate and review and follow so you don't miss out. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, be sure and click that bell so you don't miss out on the next upcoming episode. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, and I'll be looking to see you right here on the next episode of Raising Private Money.
Are you feeling inspired by the knowledge you gained in this episode? Then head over to jconner.com/moneyguide. That's jconner.com/moneyguide and download your free guide that shares 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business right now. Again, that's jconner.com/moneyguide to get your free guide. We'll see you next time on Raising Private Money with Jay Conner.